Please rise for the invocation by Reverend David Roberts, pastor, Morning Star First Baptist Church.
Let us pray. Most gracious and all-wise God, great creator of this universe, ruler and master of our soul. Father God, we're in a serious situation within this city. And we need your guidance. We need your anointing. We need your food. And we need your move, Father God. So we ask right now that you come into this setting at this present day and time. Would you touch our hearts and our minds that we can be on one accord, one with another, for the purpose of serving our fellow mankind. We ask this right now in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes for September 4th meeting? Motion by Ms. Patton, second by Ms. Fox. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All members are present. Motion to reaffirm and ratify on second reading.
Make a motion. Second.
Motion by Mr. Guest, second by Mr. Seaver. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion's carried. Anything to be moved from the consent agenda?
Hearing none, Mr. Mayor, I move approve.
Second. Motion by Mr. Lael, second by Mr. Meisner. I think everybody's had a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion's carried. I think we're to you, Mr. Bird.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First departmental report this evening. I'll ask Captain Reed Baird to come to the podium and present. Mr. Bobby Baker is going to participate in that presentation as well, the code enforcement update and the activities in the police department this past year.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. Good evening, members of council, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Cronin. I'm going to present to you some information regarding code enforcement activity from fiscal year 2011-2012 and what the unit has been doing. So let's just start and jump right into performance measures. Basically, what's been going on in the unit, how many calls did we answer, things of that nature. 11-12, we saw 808 total cases assigned to our officers. That is both minimum housing and nuisance cases combined. 139 of those 808 are minimum housing, 669 are nuisance cases, which breaks down to about 260 cases per code enforcement officer for fiscal year 11-12. Percentage of all of these calls combined abated by the owner, which is us, the city, not having to go take care of the problem, is about 95%, and that's a combination of both. Demolitions, big activity that we participate in. This is a comparison, a benchmark comparison, and the only thing we can really benchmark ourselves to is the Concord Code Enforcement Unit in Concord, North Carolina. Because as of today, they are really the only unit who does things similar to us and is essentially the same size in as far as more than one code enforcement officer. I'll get into that in just a minute, what that means. And what we saw for the same time period is we currently have 3 code enforcement officers, and we broke it down by year. Concord had 7, we had 3. In 2009, as far as demolitions, and that is cases the code enforcement unit was involved in that ended in the demolition of the property. In 2009, Hickory Police Code Enforcement was involved in 25 of these. Concord 21, 2010, Hickory Police Department Code Enforcement 35. Concord was involved in 22. 2011, we were involved in 44. 2011, you can see Concord was 20. And for 2012, 49. And that's 8 to date. And that is because Concord actually takes their numbers on a calendar year opposed to a fiscal year. So we don't have that final result comparison yet. When you break all that down, and you look at what percentage of these demolitions did the city have to get involved in, whether that be Hickory in our case or Concord in their case, and how much of those demolitions are carried out by the owner, we have a 96% rate of owner abatement for our demolitions for that time period, and Concord has 62% owner abatement, which means on the other part, they're actually city council, as we had come to you before, to recommend an ordinance be adopted to demolish the property. This is just a visual of the trends we saw over these demolitions for the past 4 years. and we break it down between residential, commercial, that percentage that is owner abatement, which again means the owner takes care of it once we get involved, and the percentage that have had to be city abated, where we've actually had to come to you and or send our contractors onto a piece of property to have that done and then paid for by the taxpayer and then assess a lien on that property. And as you can see, the breakdown over here to the right, the colors represent the year or the time frame, with green being 08, 09, the light green being 09, 10, 10, 11 being the blue, and the brown being 11, 12. And as you can see, the demolitions have increased each year, except for the city abated. And the percentage of owner abatement has increased over the same time period. So what all this basically means is that although residential and commercial demolitions have increased over this time period, our owner abatement continues to increase, whereas our city abatement is decreasing. So property owners appear to be getting the message that once the city has to get involved, that they are responsible and accountable for their property. And these are just the numbers of specifically commercial demolitions. If you remember from our last annual report, we talked about the increases we were seeing in commercial property and having to get involved with commercial minimum housing cases. And you'll see that 08, 09, we only had 3. 9, 10, we dropped to 2, but then we started that trend of coming up to 5, and 10, 11, and 11, 12 ended with 7. All 17 of these demolitions were paid for and handled by the property owners. So the city didn't have to pay for any of the demolitions on any of our commercial cases. This is a total overall breakdown of our calls for service. And as you can see, 45% of all our cases, now this includes both nuisance and minimum housing, comes from our citizens. 18% are law enforcement, and what that means is our officers, our police officers who are out there answering calls for service in the community. When they see something or recognize something that they now know is a violation of a nuisance code or minimum housing, they're contacting our code enforcement unit. Hickory Fire Department is responsible for 10% of these calls. Municipalities such as from City Hall, Action Center Request, Catawba County account for 2%, and then 25% proactive. One note about proactive, generally our proactive cases, we really don't have the opportunity for officers to go on random patrol. These proactive cases are generally when one of our officers is called to a location, they will check the entire street and the entire community around that particular problem piece of property, and they will then address any other violations they see. When we count that statistic, it gets labeled as proactive by the officer because they do initiate it. However, the catalyst for that really is the complaint we've already been called to. Other agencies that have moved to this model of code enforcement within the police department of the city, currently Newton and Conover and Troutman are all finalizing code enforcement officers to work under this umbrella. Agencies that have contacted us asking for our policies, codes, suggestions, and models include Burke County, Lincoln County, Catawba County, and Garner, North Carolina. And a couple of these have even asked for us to come and do presentations on how we here in the city of Hickory do this. Chronic violator, the thing that we talked about, the amendment rather, a couple of years ago, where we had our first full year in 11-12 of chronic violator. Basically, what this means, what you're seeing here is we had 12 chronic violators from the previous calendar year, because what the code allows you to do is in the previous calendar year, you can't be on the chronic violator list until you've had 3 calls for service in the previous calendar year. So we ended up with 12 on our list for this year, which accounted for 12 calls for service within that calendar year. 5 of the violations were city abated, which resulted in the owner being invoiced for the work, and 7 were abated by the property owner. Now, as of this year, we've had no violations from the other 10 chronic violators. So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us out of that 12 property owners that were chronic violators, only 2 reoffended, and of those 2, they now have liens on their property. But the other 10 have fallen into compliance. So in essence, the chronic violator appears to be working, and we're not having to spend tax dollars on at least these cases to send out to abate violations because these property owners don't want us out there. Yes,
the
ma'am.
ones that were invoiced, was the city reimbursed?
We turn that over to collections and then the legal department. So I know that some of them are, but we have to get a more detailed report from them.
Yes, my concern with the chronic violators is that there are a couple of chronic violators in one area that I follow consistently, and then one of these parties is probably in that previous 5%. turn this property in every year. And yet it is a residence that is fronts a major entranceway into Hickory and is the entranceway to an otherwise stable neighborhood with attractive homes and homeowners that are proud of where they live. So I guess the challenge to us is, what are we going to do with an out-of-state property owner that is consistently turned in, because I consistently turn this person in, and yet it's an eyesore. And I think that's our challenge, because we still have a few chronic violators in certain areas that this drags these areas down, and that's not fair to the people that live there. So I think that's going to be a challenge as to what we do about these folks, because we seem unwilling in this particular place to condemn it.
Well, with regard to condemning a property, that does fall into general statutes, and there could be a reason we cannot legally condemn a property. So with regard to someone out of state, they follow the same process, and liens will be assessed on their property just like anyone else. If it's a matter of nuisance, then we can just continue to call that in, and if they fall on the chronic violator list, then they will no longer receive that due process, and they will fall right into that same category and hopefully fall in line with the majority of the chronic violators. I'm going to turn the rest of the presentation over to Supervisor Bobby Baker, who is actually responsible for the day-to-day operations of the unit. He's going to talk about a few specific cases and answer the questions. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council. We're just going to show you a couple of pictures of the demolitions that actually occurred and what was involved. This is invariably the commercial aspect of it. We're going to show you the 7 demolitions that were commercial for that fiscal year. They have all the warts that you can imagine. They have vagrancy. They have structural deterioration. They are a fire hazard. They have been stripped of the copper and precious metals inside. Invariably, all of these buildings have been done that way. This is the concrete machinery plant on Olin Moore Road. You can see another thing to keep in mind, we had 7 of these demolitions. For a commercial demolition, it is much more complicated than residential. You have a tremendous amount of hazard as far as the demolition itself. You have a lot of gas lines, you have a lot of power lines. You have to be very careful that while you're doing it, that you actually don't have a vagrant in there that's snuck in overnight or something like that. You have to secure the building. You have to look at EPA requirements for asbestos and whatnot. So it does, these are very time consuming and they're very detailed. You have to be very careful when you're doing these and do them right. So far, out of the 17, we have done them right, and we hope to continue that record. A lot of times the commercial building owners will request to leave the pad, and we don't mind doing that simply because any new construction on that piece of property, the pad will have to be removed more than likely unless they use it for parking or for some kind of storage facility. As well, it keeps some of the maintenance down for that lot, so that's a benefit in that case. This is building right, as a matter of fact, we have a commercial building right across the street from this, 1720 Highway 70 Southwest, that we will be addressing in the near future. This is the old Hughes Realty building and the hosiery mill. Same conditions the other buildings were in. You can see we do have issues that once these buildings, just like any kind of residential property, just on a little bit bigger scale, that once they're torn down, that we do have to keep them maintained through the nuisance code. This is a very visible building. You can see the condition of the building prior to code enforcement's involvement. The building was overgrown. The main building in the back, the doors were open, vagrancy taking place in that building. The garage area in the front there, middle picture, upper middle, structurally unsound, the roof was collapsing in that. We did tear that building down, and you can see the lot has been cleaned up. We did have to go back in through the nuisance aspect about 2 weeks ago to clean this lot back up again. The owner is very willing to do that because he knows, he's seen what has happened with part of the building. He doesn't want that to happen with the rest of the building. So they become a little bit more compliant in this situation. This was a building on 11th Avenue Southeast. This was actually owned or purchased by Martin Marietta. We were having a lot of calls by the neighbors in that area, which part of this is in the ETJ, part of it is in the city. A lot of vagrancy going on, a lot of criminal activity and calls for service in that area. So a fairly big furniture factory that we took down. You can see it was a little bit hidden, but that's a great place to commit crime. This very visible, even though this is a house, this is a commercial property. This was the property entering Morris Ferry Phase 2 that was deteriorating very rapidly. We had a lot of calls for service there for vagrancy, for theft, very dangerous situation. I believe this property was going to be used for the proposed Walmart at the time. That fell through, but this is a commercial lot. And that house was demolished. Sometimes you actually hate to see that happen because that was actually a beautiful structure that was let go in total disrepair. This building on 1st Avenue Southwest, there was a fire previously in the building. The roof was unsound. One thing that we do want to make sure is that if there are any calls for service in these buildings, that the first responders are not put at any kind of danger whatsoever. In these particular cases, where the roofs have allowed water penetration, they become very unstable. If fire or police are called because of vagrancy and there's a fire set or theft involved, it becomes a very dangerous situation for the first responders, and that's just something that we don't want to allow happen. This is the old A&W furniture plant on 9th Street Drive Northeast. That was a wooden structure. A lot of things going on there with graffiti outside, inside. A water riser actually ruptured in the building. When we went inside for the inspection, this was one of the buildings going through the process of foreclosure, bankruptcy, bank taking acquisition of it. The bank actually took acquisition of the building one day prior to the violation letter being written. So bad timing on their part. The residential demos, very typical of what we see throughout the city. And I'll just say briefly, the map in front of you here is on the floor. This is an indication of all of the demolitions that have occurred through fiscal year 2012. This is 154 demolitions. And that will give you an idea of the areas that are of more concern. Just typical housing demolitions. Some are small. As you can see here, this particular one had a total infestation where the neighbors were actually, all of the neighbors were complaining about roaches and fleas infesting their houses because of what was going on at this residence. Some of the houses are a little bit bigger. These don't take nearly as long, not nearly as complicated as the commercial buildings. That house had been standing in that condition as long as I can remember being in Hickory, so I'm trying to take care of that. This is an interesting, outside of demolitions, code enforcement's involved in a lot of different aspects that pertain to construction, but any kind of condition that is detrimental to the property value of others. This was, in particular, this was a retaining wall in Morris Ferry that collapsed. Was in that condition for well over a year. The HOA contacted us and asked us if there was something we could do about it. We were told very quickly by the owner's attorney that did we want another sinkhole, because this was going to be $1 million fix. So we had to use a little bit of creative thinking. We got Duke Energy involved. We got engineering firms involved. We got their attorneys involved. We got everything involved so that there was going to be no light at the end of the tunnel. This actually took over a year between the negotiations, between the engineers, the lawsuits, everything involved, and that's what it looks like today. So that was a fairly complicated nuisance situation. The question was asked, with all of these demolitions, is it detrimental to the city? If you take the tax value of the structures demolished for the fiscal year 11-12, it came to $1,882,000. The unpaid taxes on that particular property, which basically means that it was abandoned property, probably absentee ownership, $18,948. That's a small portion of it, but when you look at the revitalization, and you've only got two choices: continued deterioration, where you have crime, where you have that deterioration, where you have a city that looks like it is going in one direction when it should be going in the other, or you go ahead and step up to the plate, do the demolitions. The revitalization of two properties along the commercial end of it came to just the tax value of $22,245,000. That's just two out of the 17 that we've done so far. That doesn't include the payroll taxes. It doesn't include the inventory taxes. It doesn't include capital gains taxes. Everything else is beneficial to the city. Southern Desk is another big project that everybody is familiar with that we had to tackle this fiscal year as well. Substantial project, not to be a demolition, but the remediation of this was complicated as well. Just some pictures of before, tremendous amount of debris inside. General statute dictates that all combustibles, junk and debris inside the building has to be removed before it can be closed up, as well as a safety issue. Everything is cleaned up, as you can see at the interior pictures, as well as the exterior. As the progress went along, the steel sheeting over the windows, suggestion that we came up with, you voted on that. I think you made a great decision. It has so far held the test of time. We've had just 2 panes of glass broken out that window. We have had to remediate the nuisance aspect of it one time since then. It does look like it is currently an existing warehouse instead of an abandoned building. So I think that is a semi-success story for what the option was.
I remember I rode with you the one in Marietta, and you had pointed that out, and I just think this department needs to be commended for the absolute wonderful job they do for neighborhoods that do have absentee landlords, people that just let property go by the wayside, and it does create places for drug use, just all kinds of issues that impact, as Ms. Fox was saying, they impact all the neighborhoods. So thank you for what you do, and we'd love to see more of it.
Well, I'd like to thank the council and city management as well for the political will that you have shown this year. There's a tremendous amount of gnashing of teeth when you're dealing with this kind of thing, and we appreciate that you have stood behind us and that you have supported the unit, because that means everything to you.
And I got to say, too, after seeing the presentation, how it struck me that you're operating this unit, and y'all seem to be very solution-oriented, and I think that's wonderful for government. In other words, there were several cases in there that you could run just by the book, and the result might have been different, favorably or unfavorably for the city. But you guys had the retaining wall is a great example. Southern Desk, that y'all really worked to find a solution, and that's also to be commended. That's a good job well done.
We thank you for that. It is, I think, more complicated than most people realize, because we have to use all the resources available, from Secretary of State to tax records to whatever. But we researched the ownership to make sure you can't get a 95% abatement rate without finding something that owner does not want to lose. So we try to make sure that the taxpayer is not putting the burden of people that are a little responsible are not present in the city.
Well, I just want to say I've been here a while and spent a lot of hours in neighborhoods that are challenged, particularly challenged with absentee landlords. And we have, since we created this division and we've moved to the police department, it is so exciting to see your dedication to what you're doing. I guess that it's a challenge. The challenge still remains those 5% of chronic offenders that don't live here and pull down, stable neighborhoods. And so, maybe we just need to figure out what to do with that 5%. But I thank you because this is a department that has taken the challenge and you have risen to the occasion, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And I would like to mention that the individual officers in this particular type thing, any regulatory agencies such as IRE and ourselves, and those guys are fabulous, and we work very closely together on a lot of this stuff. The officers are individually responsible for their cases, and they take that challenge upon themselves. And I'm very proud to be working with a group of people that are that success-oriented and that are willing to put their neck out there a little bit to get the job done. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate them.
Thank you. Second item of business department reports is for council to consider designating a voting delegate and an alternative voting delegate for the annual North Carolina League of Municipalities business meeting, which is to be held October 23rd, 2012 in Charlotte, North Carolina. So if you all want to discuss and consider that, and I'll remind you that the 2013 conference will be here in Hickory. So we get the convenience of going to Charlotte to meet with our fellow elected and appointed officials in cities around the state this year, and the next year we'll be happy to invite them to Hickory. And you remember when we did that about 7 years ago, I think. And the big boom of the economy with all the hotel rooms and the events at the restaurants and the convention center, and excited to host them again next year. But you do need to designate your voting delegate for this year's business meeting and an alternate.
Who all is going? I would encourage you, I'm not lecturing you, but I would encourage you to go, if you can, just for one day. I'm not going to say overnight. I'm going down one day so I can be listening to the weather side. It's worth going, and you'll gain, you'll get your time's worth just going to the exposition hall and seeing all of the various vendors and things that provide the cities. I'm trying to think of some of the things that I enjoy seeing. I enjoy seeing the big street sweepers. Of course, there's always fire trucks. Art, furniture, outdoor furniture, city furniture. Various incident reporting techniques for citizens. The latest technology is in there. If you walk through that exhibit hall and just spend a minute or two in front of each exhibit, you learn a tremendous amount about how people are doing things across the country. So I would encourage you to go, but if I'm the only one going, I will nominate myself.
How was that?
What a salesman.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Now, do we have an alternate yet? Not yet. I'm going to work on that. Appointments to boards and commissions. Ms. Pat?
I would like to appoint Crystal Kidney to the Community Relations Council.
I have Kelly Fulcher to the Community Relations Council.
And I'd like to nominate Ramona Hodge to Hickory International Council. I make a motion we accept those nominations.
Second.
Motion by Wright, second by Meisner. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. It's unanimous. Mr. Cliff Moon is requested to be heard.
I'm Cliff Moon, 2925 8th Street, Court Northeast. Mr. Mayor, Council members, Mr. Quinn, Mr. Berry. I have two very brief things I wanted to say to the council tonight. One is thanks to my councilman Bruce Meisner and to all to the council to let you know we had a road project, which I'm sure you're aware of, on 8th Street Court this summer. It was a pretty big thing down the hill and sort of kept Bruce and I apart, but anyway, no, I'm just teasing.
You never
But
came to my section of the neighborhood.
I'm trying to get up the hill. My signs are coming up the hill, as you've noticed, coming down the hill. My signs for the campaign are coming up the hill. I'll be glad to put one in your yard. Anyway, but that's not what I want to talk about in my 3 minutes. So, but I wanted to thank the city. I wanted to thank the city council. I wanted to thank the city workers. During the process of that work, which was done very well at the bottom of the hill, a contractor backed a trailer into my driveway and it dug up my driveway. And the city came very expeditiously and took care of that and fixed it, and it's in great shape. It's actually in better shape than it was before it was messed up. So, and I didn't pay the contractor to do that. So anyway, but I also wanted to just mention very briefly that as of tonight, of course, we have finished an interesting and most exciting process in our city history, and the first petition drive-driven referendum. And a lot of things have gone down, but I just wanted to say that I think this has been an amazing process for the city of Hickory, in my opinion. And as a candidate for public office, I just think it's wonderful that we've had this opportunity. I thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the work that you and I did together in terms of the debate forum, and thank you for your help in that. And I just, however it turns out tonight, we are going forward as a city, for sure. And again, thank you very much.
The collaboration has already begun without knowing what the outcome is.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moon and I have agreed, by the way, that if we're picking up our signs, we'll also pick up their signs. If they're picking up their signs, we'll pick up our signs. We're going to throw away the signs. Mr. Moon wants the stakes. Please save the stakes.
I need them for some other signs, right? That's
Anything else?
Just as a non-business item, I'd like to recognize a scout witness, Lucas Winters, from Scout. Is that Troop 321? 300. Okay, great.
And is that a scout back there?
I don't know if we have that.
No scout. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Come down Friday night and enjoy the music.
It was a fun time last Saturday. On the last Friday night, a lot of, I came down Saturday and just enjoyed it by myself. Friday was a wonderful, wonderful time, and I recommend that you come down. What do we have? The Buku Blues and stuff? The Buku Blues. That means lots of blues, right? Okay. Very much blues. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Patton, second by
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Lael. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all for being here.
I'll listen to
Where's your brother, Barry Pope at?
Probably over there watching something. Irene, you want to buy it? I'll get you a certificate. I'm always somebody
Consider that.
Cliff.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Thanks, sir. Good faith.